I'm Chance Storland, and this is the Spurs Insider, our weekly NBA podcast from ExpressNews.com. And I'm joined now once again by San Antonio Express News sports writer Tom Orsborn. Great to have you back here, Tom. I hear you had a fun trip recently to that All-Star game.
Yeah, Chance, it was a good time. This was my fourth All-Star game I've been to in a row. Been to some previously, but this is the fourth in a row in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it went well. It went really well, not only for me but for LaMarcus Aldridge. He played 11 minutes. Got 2 points, collected a handful of rebounds and assists. He hit his first shot, which was great. And he kind of said after that, everything else was just him focusing on doing the dirty work and helping his team, Team LeBron, to the victory, which gave LaMarcus a 6-1 record in All-Star games. This was his seventh All-Star game. He's now 6-1. So if you got LaMarcus Aldridge on your team, you have a good chance of winning.
Well, let's hope that rings true for the Spurs this season as well. And then also, speaking of records, I mean, this was important. This extends one of those records that people are wondering how long this is going to keep going.
Absolutely. 21 consecutive games with at least one Spur in the All-Star game. And LaMarcus, that was a huge point of pride for him. He's really bought into this organization, came here as a free agent before the 2015 season. And he's really, it's now his home. And he takes a lot of pride in enhancing and furthering these streaks that the Spurs have. The most important being a playoff streak, which is still in doubt right now. But, he takes a lot of pride in that. The other thing, Chance, that he really enjoyed at the All-Star game, his son, LaMarcus Jr., 8-year-old son, was with him the whole weekend. And, you seldom saw LaMarcus without LaMarcus Jr. And it was really cool to see because LaMarcus hasn't been the most, outgoing in terms of putting himself and family members in the spotlight. But he was really at ease at this All-Star game. It was his seventh, like I said, and he really knows the routine by now, knows the ins and outs, doesn't stress over appearances and all the things that are on their plate. And he really had fun with LaMarcus in tow, and it was really neat to see. We saw another side of LaMarcus at the All-Star game, and he was so outgoing and did a great job during his media day interview. Really had some insightful answers and filled up our notebooks, and just a pleasure to be around him the whole weekend.
So that was the All-Star game. The Spurs have had a nice break while that was going on. Tomorrow, that break ends, and they're playing a team that they had a nice victory at home. It was really fun. I remember watching that. I remember talking about that here on the Spurs Insider, and I'm looking forward to discussing after this game tomorrow on the road at Toronto, playing the Raptors, and going to be facing Kawhi Leonard again.
Yeah. It's the rodeo road trip, which started way back when on February 4th, has been, I don't want to say a disaster, but it hasn't gone well for sure. They're 1-4 heading into this game in Toronto. They resumed the rodeo road trip Friday night at the Raptors. Then they conclude it with back-to-back games in New York against the Knicks and the Nets. The Toronto game has been circled on a lot of people's calendars for a long time, primarily DeMar DeRozan. In that game you mentioned, the first meeting between the teams on January 3rd, the Spurs just it was at the AT&T Center. Kawhi Leonard, the hated Kawhi Leonard, was returning back after being traded after his very disgruntled, very drama-filled season last year, and the fans just let him have it. It was one of the most chilling nights I've ever seen at the AT&T Center from Spur fans in any venue. dating back to the Hemisphere Arena, the Alamo Dome. This was just a lot of pent up frustration being poured out at Kawhi Leonard. Just the opposite chance should occur Friday night in Toronto. DeMar DeRozan is beloved by the Raptors, and it was hard on everyone seeing him traded from that franchise. And DeMar in that game against he loves fans, loves the city of Toronto, loves his teammates, but boy, he has it in for management for trading him, and that was reflected in that game on January 3rd, which the Spurs won 125-107. And DeMar was outstanding, recording his first career triple-double. He had 21 points, 14 rebounds, 11 assists, 2 steals. And you would think he would be poised for another such game in Toronto. So that game is just going to be filled with so much emotion on both sides. It's going to be tough for the Spurs. Kawhi will be looking for revenge. He certainly has had this game circled since the January 3rd loss. Kawhi didn't play poorly in that game. He scored 21 points, but still his team got embarrassed, and I'm sure he's going to be out for revenge. The other thing to look at in that game, Chance, is Danny Green. Danny Green, the former Spur, who was also traded as part of that deal, summertime deal, was 0 for 7 from the floor in the January 3rd game. And he's going to want to have a much better game. So it's going to be tough for the Spurs. That's a tough one to come back to after the break. That's going to be, it's going to be a must-see game, but it's going to be very tough for the Spurs.
Before we get off the topic of Kawhi Leonard, who hasn't been spoken about here on the podcast in a long time, and so it's always fun to bring that back up. I want to ask you about what I'm calling photo gates. Do you know what I'm talking about? That photo? What are your thoughts? There was some space between people who used to be on the same team.
I think that's a little overblown. LaMarcus went out of his way to say several times that he looked forward to seeing Kawhi there in Charlotte. I don't think there's much to that myself. The interactions I saw between them, there were no indications of any friction. That's not LaMarcus's style. I just don't buy into that. I don't think there's any hard feelings between him and Kawhi. Now, Kawhi and some of the veterans on the Spurs that are retired now, primarily Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, that might be a different story after they had that players-only meeting last spring to confront him about his injury and whether he was going to come back. But I think everything's cool between him and LaMarcus.
Yeah, you probably could have fit all those disgruntled parties in the empty space between Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge. So I understand what you're saying there. But yeah, Tom Osborne shooting that one down. I bring it up. Tom says no. I respect that. We got some more time here, Tom. Let's talk about Derek White. He's come up time and time again here on the podcast. Really surprising with his really effective play for the Spurs, an integral part of the team. You think the importance of having a healthy Derek White on the Spurs is really key for continuing another record, their playoff record.
Yeah, it can't be overstated, Chance. Greg Popovich has said this repeatedly. They have to have him back and have to have him healthy if they're going to make a successful playoff push here in the last quarter of the season. He's our best perimeter defender, and that's where it begins and ends. The conversation about Derek's importance to the team begins and ends with that conversation. They just are not the same team defensively with him out of the lineup. He's a tough perimeter defender. He's also a good shot blocker for a guard, kind of following the footsteps of Danny Green. So they just need him back. And plus, the offense is a little discombobulated without him at point guard. Although I kind of, I don't buy into that 100% because I think when DeMar DeRozan has the ball in his hands a lot, he plays better. But But DeMar's on the record as saying that he'd rather have Derek at point guard. So I'm going to defer to his stance on that. But yeah, they just having him back overall would give them a huge lift. Now they practiced. They had a practice late Wednesday afternoon. Their first practice after the break, after the All-Star break, coming out of the All-Star break, and Pop said that Derek's getting closer. He did some work during that practice. Pop indicated that at some point he'll return on this road trip. It may not be against Toronto, although I would not be surprised to see him make the trip and be back in the lineup against the Raptors. But, it's about the same amount of time now. He missed the first 9 games of the season with a heel injury on the other foot. So it's been about the same amount of time that he was out before. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him back on this trip. But yeah, they need the guy back. They need him back. He's played so well this season. You just can't overstate it. They need Derek White back to be healthy if they're going to make a successful playoff push. The schedule gets easier down the stretch here, Chance, but, as the Spurs have proven, you can throw the schedules out a lot. They've lost a lot of games on paper they shouldn't have lost. So they need all hands on deck for this final push.
And then wrapping up here, Tom, final thoughts, perhaps any predictions for the rest of the road trip? Obviously, important game tomorrow.
Yeah. I don't see them winning that game. I really don't. Like I said, Toronto, they were embarrassed in San Antonio on January 3rd. They're going to be out for revenge. And, Marc Gasol, they made the trade for Gasol, and it's been about enough time for him to get acclimated, so he could be a factor in this game. And then, they go to the woeful New York Knicks on Sunday. They should win there, although they've been known to lose to the Knicks in New York. That has happened, but I'm going to circle that as a win. And then they conclude the rodeo road trip on Monday, February 25th, at the Brooklyn Nets. They squeaked out a win over the Nets in San Antonio earlier on January 31st. Jared Allen had a good game, the young former Texas Longhorn center for the Nets. I look for him to have another good game here on Monday. So that's a tough game. I look at that probably as a loss. And then the good news is they come home for 3 games: Detroit, Oklahoma City, and Denver. They should beat Denver. Oklahoma City, that's a toss-up. Denver game will be tough. But being at home, I look for them to put together a little streak there and win 3 in a row.
And thank you to San Antonio Express News sports writer Tom Orsborn for joining me for today's episode of the Spurs Insider, our weekly NBA podcast from expressnews.com. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.